Please welcome to the stage Amanda Godreau.
Oh my goodness. This is not terrifying at all. I want to start off by saying how grateful I am to be here. It's a real honor to share this stage, but also this room with so many talented people that I really admire. And for those of you who don't know me and didn't see the intro, my name is Amanda Godreau. I'm a CG designer, and I'm based, and I'm from the island of Puerto Rico. What's up? It's this tiny little speck in the Caribbean that has so much personality and packs a punch. And it's the ultimate flex because I get to say I'm from the same place as half of the cast of Wednesday, Bad Bunny, and so many different wicked people. And I also like to say that, the pina colada is ours. It's a very weird flex. And also, since we're going to be talking about audio today, a really fun fact is that all the original bat sounds from the Batman movies, the original ones, were actually recorded in Puerto Rico. So I'm from a town called Calle, which is in this beautiful valley of mountains. And I lived there for almost 20 years of my life before moving stateside. It wasn't until after moving that I realized how much of that scenery I took for granted. I was just like, oh yeah, mountains and all this stuff, pretty great. And I think looking back now at my town, I can clearly see where my appreciation of color and design came from. I miss walking around my neighborhood that was filled with all these beautiful houses and seeing people that recognize me. That level of familiarity and culture is something that I think I bring into my artistic practice and how I interact with people. And I was told that I should say that I took this picture, and I did. I'm not over-exaggerating about how beautiful this place is. And I feel like being surrounded by all that beautiful nature got me subconsciously thinking about design before I even went to art school. I was constantly being exposed to things like color and depth, and was incredibly super lucky that these were my surrounded. And a big part of my art comes from where I'm from. I was super lucky to be raised by my amazing mother. And it's not just because she was great at raising me, but it's also I was able to be around her own talent and intelligence. You see, my mom is a cultural anthropologist, and she's devoted her entire professional career to researching racism at an academic level. She helped me process my experience as a Black, Latina, and queer artist, and she's actually here today. I feel like having her in my corner was a very privileged experience. And I wouldn't be able to talk on the stage and talk about the things I'm going to share with you guys without her hard work and dedication. But first, I want to talk about my work. So my work looks very different. And I really enjoy learning and picking apart new softwares. I feel like I try to learn something new with every single program that I learn, but something that stays very consistent across my entire body of work is my appreciation for color and lighting and what that does in the world of design. I think that's something that's much more apparent in my personal work and my collaborations. I really like to seek refuge in these worlds of color and light, and it's where I feel the safest in. Whenever I have creative block or I can't think of what to do, that's when you'll see one of these on Instagram pop up. And you can hit me up with an, "Are you okay?" And I'll be like, "Yeah." I also absolutely love the practicality of doing things. Mediums like photography and stuff are so interesting, and even though I mostly work with CG renders now, I will always take the opportunity to get practical and dirty with my hands. To me, design is design, no matter which way you split it. And I think mixing and matching things will always be interesting to me. So I'm going to play a video next, and it's about this title sequence that I made with my very talented friend, Matthew Lupo. Woo! And we made this title sequence for our school design conference, and even though I'm not going to be showing the title sequence itself, I want to show the process of it because I feel like for an industry, we're kind of scrappy. And I love that we're kind of always mixing and matching things. So I'm just going to show you the process. Thank you. It was a real team effort, and it was so fun, and not stressful at all. And we found a lot of humor during the process of making this in undergrad. We kept reminding ourselves that we were an award-winning studio. And it was really funny. I feel like the camaraderie that we find with other artists when we're in the trenches is something that is really beautiful about this industry. But essentially, what I do on a day-to-day basis is under the general umbrella of design, photography, look dev, research, and production. I really love production, guys. I feel like the success of a project is completely dependent on before you even start the creative part. It's how we say the yes and our no's to our projects. It's how we bid things out. And it's how we evaluate our plan of attack. And that allows us to be like super creative and looser during the process. And it's something that I've learned how to do and appreciate doing on my job on a day-to-day basis. But outside of the digital world, something I've been doing recently is I've had the immense privilege of showcasing my work all across the world. Being able to see how other people interacted with my work was something I'd never really thought about doing as a digital artist. It was really surreal, and I think my main takeaway, because I know NFTs are a hot and heavy topic, was I really ended up talking to so many different people. I got to go to Portugal and speak to so many women in different parts of the world that expressed to me that if it wasn't for digital spaces, they wouldn't be able to be making a living out of the work at all. And I think living in a part of the world where it is commercially viable to make art and be in an industry that supports it is a privilege that I, and probably everyone else in this room, carries. But when I'm not on set or in galleries, I'm freelancing out of my East Coast studio. It's my little corner of the world, and I really love it. And despite the amazing views, I'm mostly staring at a screen for over 8 hours a day. Throughout my career, I feel very lucky to say that I've been able to work on some amazing projects with even cooler people. And seeing your work in the wild is not something I'm completely used to yet, but it's something that's very helpful when strangers ask me what I do. And I feel like if anyone has an answer to how to respond to, so what do you do, in a very short way, please hit me up afterwards. I'm still kind of telling people I'm a graphic designer. So when I look at my career and I try to break it down, sometimes I don't even know what happened. And I feel like when I look at these presentations and I hear people's accomplishments, I want to hear about what they did before they went to art school. I want to hear about what their experiences were that led up to that. So that's what I'm going to do today. And for me, that story starts when I was 13 in 2011, when I took a job as a wedding photography assistant. So for a couple years, I was holding flashes and running around behind someone with a camera and witnessing the sheer madness of the wedding industry as a whole. And that really taught me very early on discipline. And it taught me how to think about light and composition and managing things that were kind of hectic. Later in 2013, I worked at a boutique studio called The Dreamcatcher, and they hired me as their social media person, not knowing that I was 15. And I was essentially in charge of shooting all the content for the rooms, figuring out how to plan the grid. And even though I wasn't thinking about it now, when I look at what I do on a daily basis, figuring out how a grid works is telling a story. And that's something that I think we're all familiar about when we think about things like storyboarding. I did the same thing at a larger scale at St. Regis in 2016, except this time I was working with real people, clients, some of them who included celebrity clients. And it was a much bigger scale. But I think the thing before art school and before graduating high school that taught me the most was that between 2015 and 2017, I actually shot destination weddings. So by the time I graduated high school, I had shot over 25 weddings. And it taught me a lot about contracts and working with people. And I think that in this industry, sometimes directors and creative directors can seem very scary. But let me tell you, there's nothing scarier than trying to get the perfect picture for a wedding. So I think very early on it humbled me and taught me like a new threshold for interacting with people. When I started my journey towards higher education, I graduated high school and I started my journey at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. I went under the concentration of multidisciplinary studies, so I took a wide breadth of courses ranging from anthropology, writing, and all different types of things. It was then in this period of my time that my studies got interrupted by Hurricane Maria, which claimed the lives of over 4,000 people on my island. And after that, I shortly went to NYU, this time with the concentration in coding and design. It was there that I took my first typography class, and I realized that all I wanted to do was look at letters forever, which led me to realize that I needed to go someplace way more specialized to learn that. And that's how I ended up at Ringling College of Art and Design in 2018. Woo! So I actually came in through the graphic design department because at that point I still had no idea what motion design was, which is I think the case for many people who are not in our industry. But they have this mandatory course that they make graphic designers take to sort of understand animation, because I feel like graphic design and motion design keep inching closer and closer to each other. And it was in this class that they were kind of encouraging the importance of motion. And I didn't want to hear it. I was like, I don't want to animate stuff. I don't want to do stuff. And it wasn't until they pulled up this video that completely changed my mind. And that video was Sins by Ariel Costa. So this is a very full circle moment for me. After my freshman year at Ringling, I was super lucky to land an internship at a studio called Sibling Rivalry in Manhattan, in New York. And after that, I did a virtual internship with the folks at Gunner, which is an amazing studio. So I got hired as their 3D intern 6 months into knowing C4D. And I really loved the freedom that came with being an intern. I got to say I don't know things all the time. And it was during this period of my time that I was able to make, I think, the biggest body of work to date that I'm proud of, because I was able to do so much exploration. And it was also during this period of time when the whole world went remote that I found real solidarity and community online, because all of us were at home. So a couple months after that, I made the crazy decision of going freelance. And this was a very interesting experience. I would get emails from producers being like, hey, are you available? What's your rate? And I'd be like, hey, yeah, here's my class schedule, though. Please don't schedule dailies. And I did that for 2 years straight. And it wasn't until last year, in 2022, that I actually graduated with my BFA in motion design. Thank you. So I think looking back at my career, something that I think is very important to acknowledge is that when I graduated, I was 23 and I was extremely burnt out. This landed me not once, but twice in the hospital because I thought I was having heart attacks. And I didn't take it seriously either. I looked back at my archives and I found this text that I sent to a friend that said, hey, I know we're having an assignment due and I have dailies at 11 tomorrow, but would you mind uploading my work? I'm at the hospital. I think I'm having a heart attack. And it was one of these situations where this meme comes to mind. It was like I asked myself if I was the problem, and we said no. And I was in complete denial of how I had overextended myself physically, emotionally, how that was impacting my emotional state and the people around me. I definitely did not want to acknowledge anything. And I lost myself chasing perfection in every film, every client job, every software that I can find, and I refused to look at the bigger picture. I think it's so easy in these presentations to get lost in the awards and the achievements, which inspire us to push harder and work more, especially in an industry that's hard to break into. But I think especially for younger artists, or artists that went through this historic period in time, context is really everything. When I think about my timeline, it's full of achievements and successes, but it's also filled with a lot of hard realities. I went back to school months after surviving a hurricane that devastated my island. I went into my sophomore year and there was a pandemic and we witnessed George Floyd be murdered. And then I graduated into a recession. All of these things were incredibly difficult to process, and I felt incredibly lonely during it. And I think for some of us who look like political statements in our country at times, it's not something that I could close out. It's not a tab that I could ignore. And it's something that made me incredibly uncomfortable, almost at all times. But during this process, and during this time, something that I think is so important is to look at the good of things and how rare my experience was. The reason I went to design school is because my typography teacher was a Black woman that saw talent in me and encouraged me to push further. My first internship at Sibling Rivalry, I worked under 2 female creative directors, which is incredibly rare. And then at Godreau, I got to work with Handel. And even after that, the first film I was invited to work on, Between the Lines, was led by an all-female crew. It's not until after I experienced all these things that I realized what a fluke that was. Because there are very few Black ADs, CDs, directors, and studio owners, and even fewer that are women. And I think it's an international truth for anyone that being young and Black in our industry, you can struggle to understand how to navigate it. In 2019, something that I reference a lot is the AIGA's census that reported that only 3% of designers are Black. And this is for an industry that is so much bigger, older, and has resources for academic nationwide. The numbers for our industry, for motion design, are astronomically smaller. And I think in order for our industry to look different and feel different, we have to start thinking about the value of mentorship and connection. Because other than my brief interaction with the people I mentioned, I found myself very alone and writing about my experience behind closed doors. And I want to take this opportunity to read some quotes to you guys. I remember being referred to as a Black animated girl once. It has always been a reminder that people saw my race first and my talent second. From then on, I've always thought I had to be so skillful in my craft that a recruiter could no longer see my race or that I am a woman. Being the only person of color in a white environment caused me so much anxiety that my physical and mental health have reaped the consequences ever since. In order to lead a project, I feel like I have to break out of my docile persona in the office, but if I show my naturally assertive personality, will I be dubbed difficult to work with or angry? And lastly, one awkward joke or comment could put a spotlight on my race and make me feel completely alone in a room of people I cannot talk to or seek refuge with. And while I did do a lot of journaling, I want to be fully transparent and say these quotes aren't mine. They're actually Rachel Reed's, who's a director, a 2D and 3D character animator with over a decade of experience. In making this presentation and connecting with Rachel, as well as other people like us, I realized that whether you're new in this industry or you have years into it, there's a shared experience here. An experience that bleeds into almost every seniority level in our industry. Because when you experience comments such as these in a work environment, it's extremely damaging. Witnessing cultural impressions and imitation, people asking if they can touch your hair, or even asking if you're the producer on a job when you're the only female member on a team. I also think there's overall pressure over having to hold an opinion that reflects a greater demographic that's often not even in the room. And that's totally not the position I've put myself in today. But when you experience these things constantly, you start wondering, how do I bring this up without it impacting my career? Am I going to have to advocate for myself every step of the way? Will I be treated as the diversity hire? And why do people think I'm so angry? I think it's really important to recognize that these are success stories. The people that I ask for these quotes are people who make a living. I make a living off of what I do. And in a way, we have a seat at the table. And I think there are still so many experiences that don't get this platform and this experience. So when I started thinking about my presentation and what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about thinking about our value. Because we spend so much of our time doing that already, whether it's our rate, our social media following, freelance versus full-time, or even like our skill versus demand. It's something that takes so much mental energy out of us all the time. And something I didn't really hear in my career so far is thinking about my value as an individual. And I want to leave this not only as a resource for the people in this room, but for students and young creatives coming up who will see this presentation, hopefully online, that you should never be the first person to devaluate you. Some people will do it for you, subconsciously, happily, you name it. And I think the industry's secret is that everyone has imposter syndrome, and that no one is going to give you a job that they don't think you're capable of doing. So you should never be the first person in the room to think that you don't deserve to be there. To surround yourself with people who advocate for your equity, not just your equality. I think this goes beyond the Black experience. I think this goes for the people in our industry who are queer, trans, disabled, you name it. Just because there are resources, programs, and spaces for you doesn't mean it's a handout. You deserve resources that accommodate you. And it only levels the playing field for all of us so we can have fun and do our job. Focus on what you can control, because there's so much that you can't. Recessions, pandemics, maybe you catch someone on a really bad day. But I think the work that we create for ourselves is something that we will always be able to control. When I look at my own work, I found the most joy, but also the most success in making my personal work. You go to my Instagram, you go to my website, almost no commercial projects are listed, because I think the strongest voice and the strongest perspective is the one you always will hold for yourself. I think we have to embrace just being average, and this might sound weird. I think wanting to be excellent is great, but wanting to be excellent, everything all at once, not so much. It's something that's really perpetuated, especially in the Black community, that you have to work twice as good to have half as much. It's actually something that has a name. It's called John Henryism, and it's studied in places like Harvard and MIT and Stanford. We see this all over the media. There are so many statistics, articles that support this, and I think excellent is great, but it needs to be done at a pace that's organic and sustainable to your mental health. Because enjoying the process of where you're learning and where you're growing and where you're at is something that you have to do to have a longevity in this industry and in life, I think. We should talk about money. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. I think this industry has been really generous. Whenever I've asked someone what they make, they don't blink and they tell me. It's helped me identify pay disparities because they still exist within our industry. And I think at the end of the day, people genuinely want to see you get paid what you're worth. But it's in talking about these and having these conversations that we can make that happen. So I think we need to destigmatize the whole concept about speaking about money. And lastly, I want to talk about how you have to learn how to celebrate you. This is so important to do. And it's a skill to be able to celebrate your success, one that I'm still learning. And I think especially when there's added context on how people perceive your success, it matters. I think especially for Black creatives, this is the case. It's going to follow you no matter how successful you are. And it followed me all the way up to this stage. When it was first made public that I was going to speak at Dash Bash, I had a slew of congratulations and thank you. But the problem is half of them looked like this. Congratulations on speaking at Dash Bash. I'll never be able to do that because I'm just another white guy. And it's so easy to just say congratulations because I know what they meant. I know that they weren't saying that I was a young, talented, ambitious, multi-talented person with a perspective. The assumption that my race was the main component to my success. I think advocating for other people to recognize your value in this industry can become a full-time job. So when Dash reached out and they gave me 40 minutes to talk about whatever I wanted, I thought long and hard about this. Because I have a body of work that I'm so excited about, that I could talk about for hours on end. But I figured that the thing that's most valuable to all of you in the room is not my work, because I'm still so early in my career, but my perspective in order to make this industry look and feel different. Obviously, this is really hard. I think the first thing I heard when I asked for advice on how to speak up about this came 5 years ago, and I was told to keep my head down and don't be difficult to work with. And that stayed with me for 5 years now because I didn't understand it. That phrase stuck with me, difficult to work with. And I didn't understand because I kept asking myself, difficult for who? It was already incredibly difficult. And I think often is uncomfortable. A lot of you might be uncomfortable right now. But I think what we need to remind ourselves is that change is meant to be difficult, but the difficult needs to be shared on both sides. I think about this black pixel far more than I care to, because it takes me back to a time and something that we need to talk about, which is visibility. We saw this square all over our pages in 2020, and it was a voluntary commitment to the black community to do the work, to do the education, so that all of us can have a great experience doing what we love. And a quote I want to read to you guys today is, for me, the issue when I got started in this industry 10 years ago was a lack of effort to find diverse talent. It was easy for studios to continue to dip into their Rolodex, which intentionally or unintentionally was perpetuating the status quo. We as an industry have made some good strides since then, but unless we're intentional about addressing this issue, talented, diverse artists will continue to get overlooked. And this quote is especially important to me because it was said by Handel Eugene, which is a very talented director, 3D artist, and someone I respect highly. And I think especially after watching all the presentations on the stage, we can attest to how different perspectives, how different cultures, and how different backgrounds influence the quality of art that we get to enjoy. There are currently very few safe spaces for black employees to voice their concerns without fear of it affecting their career. Most black creatives in our industry are either freelance or in tech. That's not a coincidence. There's a serious lack of HR in smaller studios, and a lack of resources for people who are black in mid to senior positions. This is something that we have to acknowledge, and it's something that we have to be watchful about. But the good thing is, there are so many positive things that are already happening in our industry. Gunnar is making a school that is doing animation and education. They have amazing resources that are going to be available for peer reviews in a studio environment for the people in Detroit and elsewhere. And I think this is an excellent start to start decentralizing private education because not everyone can afford it. Oddfellows has an awesome mentorship that's online and accessible to a lot of people. And I think something that we can attest to is even Dash Bash, because they're giving a platform for stories like mine. So I think this is a really good spot for me to thank all the people who made my presentation possible. I ran this through so many people, a lot of them who are not even on the screen, but it's because of the safe spaces that they've been able to create for me throughout my career, or even more recently, that I'm able to speak on this with such conviction. And even looking outside of that, when I look at this industry, I'm filled with a lot of joy. I've had so many people in this room open doors for me and give me opportunities. And I think it's a really big privilege to be able to work with the people that you can call friends and find a sense of community and camaraderie that way. There are so many people on and off the stage that are rooting for you and are making space for you. I think during this presentation, you might have identified things that you've seen or possibly even been a part of. And I think we have to remember to be kind for ourselves and remind ourselves that we all carry bias. It's not something that can be avoided. It's not anything that anyone is exempt of. We have a very long way to go, and it starts with conversations like these. This is just my story, my lived experience, and there are so many more. So before I end, I'm going to leave you all with the best advice I ever received that actually comes from my mom, which is your first thought is usually what you were conditioned to think. But it's the second one that really counts. So let's make it count. Thank you.